Welcome to TradeTheNBI.com. This is John. This report is for the 3rd of April, and not quite April Fools, but people are going to wake up to a little bit of a shock there. So, yesterday, uh, quite a bit back and forth. We had the pretty early warnings of Liberation Day, so to speak, or whatever they were calling it. Uh, Trump was going to be announcing the tariffs and how that situation was going to go. And so it was quite a lot of confusion going on within there. Within that, though, you had the magenta still dropping below MBI yellow here, so that's a negative. We were already in a situation where we were in the continuation now. Started to see a decline here of orange from a DOC standpoint, so getting close to the turnaround, buy configuration. Slight improvement, but see here the thing is we had the same dip in the shakeout at matching lows, so there was no divergence whatsoever. So the difficulty was going to be breaking of the 23%, and uh, once again, even we hit up against it, and this was at a lower level from where it was before. But then, as soon as the tariff situation got announced, you can see a major drop off from where the close was all the way up there, 57. Now we're at 55. So clear market reaction is not happy with the tariff situation, mostly because of the uncertainty. But you can already see it from a Nasdaq standpoint. We still had MBI White leading, so we were talking about back up here at the 38% or even better for the S&P. It was like, well, you're still going to go back to zero because that MBI White's just letting you know in advance of where the setup is. It's not guessing, and it was all confirmed by what we were seeing from the failure of reset here with the steel. And even when it did make the brief dip to cause the little pop up, as soon as it crossed back above again, instead of coming back down for a complete reset, it just meant that you had short term buyers were going to use up their wad, so to speak, and then it was going to be straight downhill from there. And that's exactly what it's been. And it's all a reflection of the delays, as we talked about, for what's taking place. Will this force the Fed to have to ease rates? Could be an interesting liquidity situation develop during the day in the actual open session. So we'll see how that plays out. But they may have to step in on the backside of things if they want to. They may not want to because they've certainly not been supportive in any way, shape, or form of where Trump was going. Of course, oil taking a major nosedive within this because the expectation is that economic activity is going to come to a halt because of some tariffs. Still doesn't explain in the real world why you can't, instead of buying a foreign wine, buy a domestic one, or instead of buying a foreign car, a domestic car. See, this is where their inflation argument just falls apart because there are alternatives in this world, and it's not like it's homogenistic where you can only get one product from one place. It certainly impacts those players elsewhere and affects their GDP, but it certainly means that you're going to be having that delayed build back up, which I talked about. We already saw it down with the factory orders came through, and the amount of investment in manufacturing in that is starting to skyrocket. Now it's going to be delayed. It's going to take time, but you built in the precursor. And of course, the euro loves this. They're going to get hammered from a growth standpoint and yet value because they think that somehow the U.S. is going to implode on this. We don't complain about the stupidity of why they do a thing. We have the readings. We can see what they're doing. You can just go with it, or you can be, you can still hold the opinion against the thing or realize the stupidity of it, but still doesn't mean that you can't take advantage of the trade because it's clear. Even when they get it wrong, it just means you have that much bigger upside on the flip end of it. Gold giving back some down. That's because these futures move, already down, 179 here. It's actually worse than that before. So that's for the ES, and that's going to be, a drain in liquidity this year. Still going to, despite the recent move in Bitcoin in that, you can see that we had that MBI white. Still didn't reach the zero from that move. And you had the brief, but see again, this is that week where we talk about under 25 for the magenta is always a problem. If you get that crossover, it has to have a continuation and it needs to spike. We were talking about this on the Skype chat just today, well, actually yesterday, and because it's relevant. And when you don't have that momentum push, then it just fades off and becomes the reality. ETH, though, uh, showing much clearer within that space all the way back to the zero, so satisfying that completely. And you can see from the move of the shakeout all the way back from when it first began, you had the little hiccups where they were trying to fight it, but then the distribution has just been all across since, well, the beginning of the year. And that's because they had these, unrealistic hopes of what was going to happen from a crypto move, blah, 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 blah. So let's take a closer look at what we got here from this 50K chart, because it's rather interesting. So we were looking at it and talking on our Skype chat earlier in the day. We had the move above the shakeout here on the white the previous day that called for a move down toward the 50%. Well, then happened beautifully. Magenta turns around, gives the buy signal, comes up. Then we had this little moment right here where NBI white spikes. It's like, wait, what's that all about? But well above 33 for Magenta. So it didn't take but just the one click back around, and that was the Magenta writing. But as soon as it gave that sell signal, and particularly when it dropped below 33, then you have your warning sign. It's like, okay. So we had another short cover rally. It did make it all the way to the 50%. The low was just above it, I believe. 73, and the 50% was 69. So right on target with that. The Magenta returned back above, and we had this little brief shoot up. But then NBI white spikes above it. We're under 33, and yeah, it didn't take much, because within the next bar, that's when all hell started breaking loose and from an intraday. But prior to it, at the same time, you had a DOC spread, all of it developing the same, and it just started to plummet. Once it hit the 50%, it's like, and these are one of those where even when watching it as it's developing, it's not hard to see where things are going and jump on the bandwagon for it, but you can see NBI white leading this whole way through it, so it's not done. We've already dipped down to the 54 range, so that's quite a bit more that this can fall back down even before the open. We'll see if that happens, or will there be a plunge protection? I don't know that there necessarily will be, because he's still huge elevation relative to earnings things. I mean, it's been a complete change in the multiplier. But if their view is that this is going to crash economies, then of course the multiplier for where the market should be definitely has to change, and you have to adapt to that alteration. So here it was intraday, literally right from the beginning of the morning, positive extremes. So the fillback was all the way back to the 56 right there, just from those positive extremes on a 5-minute chart. So that was a pretty clear indication early on. They drove it up beautifully. NBI white took the lead, came down to the 50%, dropped a little bit, didn't quite make it to the zero. Then it popped up later again, and that time did fill into that. But as we came across, then Trump started to make the announcements, and you'd already had Magenta under the 25 at this particular stage, below yellow, so you knew it was already in a short configuration DOC spread on the 5-minute. And then once it started to get revealed, boom. There was an early excitement because they didn't see Canada and Mexico on the chart things, and that faded really fast. This is what's happening in the post market, which now in the European session, obviously the Asian session was ugly from that standpoint. But even once the European session started, they tried to make a little bit of a move, but not a whole lot of anything. And looks like it's headed back down towards the 0% here in this particular case. But that's elevated at this stage right now in a 5-minute. But I think that's probably likely to continue broader, and you're going to revisit those lows that took place in the post market. So, interesting. Does it have all that much of an effect on the economy, other than it's going to cause people to fear, and fear is a immobilizer. And when people get scared, they freeze and don't do anything. Now, I don't think that's going to be the case from a big business standpoint, but that isn't completely what drives everything. It's also individuals and where their view on the standing of how things are. So we're in for some turmoil, and this is something that I've been saying for a while now. And then when you threw in all of the court situations and stuff, the agenda's pretty much come to a halt, in the sense that not able to really move anything anywhere. And So take that for what it is, and I think that's just an indication that it's going to be bumpy. I don't think it's one way or another as far as guaranteed that things are going to, implode or anything like that. I think a lot of countries are going to come to their senses and make changes pretty darn quick because it will be catastrophic more to them. So it's one of those where, Americans have choices. The rest of the world, not so much. You can try and protect all you want, but it's going to be expensive for them, and they certainly can't afford it, and they certainly can't afford the inflation because they need a lot of products that come from America. So it's not quite the same territory. But we'll follow it as it plays out. All good stuff, though. Very exciting. As always, anything relevant, I'll put in the Skype chat. Have a good one. Trade well.